I got to tell you, the culture and the world we live in has continued to be broken. I mean, we know this, right? We live in this world, we realize it is a broken world. We still have kids that come to our youth programs that come from broken families. I mean, the 50% statistic about divorce is still relevant today. Many of our kids will come into our programs with a mess at home. Broken hearts, broken mess, and all that junk that come into our programs because of what's taking place at home. No doubt. Not only do we have broken families, we live in this broken culture. I mean, that continues to be the same, but some things have changed. Even since I was in middle school or a teenager, things have changed. And one of the things that we're seeing that's causing a lot of damage and problems is the new drug of choice, the smartphone and social media. Those two things tied together is like a drug of choice. And if we're honest as adults, it's pretty addictive, right? If we're honest, it's pretty addictive, and it's causing some damage. And let me explain why. See, for me, when I was growing up, there was a big divide between what took place at school or social events or football, the drama, the relationships, the stresses, anxieties that took place at school. Once you came home, that didn't exist. Home was a place of rest and of peace. You step off that school bus, you get out of mom's car, you had some separation there. You actually had time where mom and dad could give you some advice. You could think things over. You could talk about what was going on. No longer is that the case. With the advent of the smartphone, those stresses that happen at school, the bullying and anxieties and all that takes place, is now 24/7 with a teenager. And the consequences are continuing to be shown, and I'm not the only one saying this. In fact, there's a book just recently published where this author is talking about this. She's a psychologist from San Diego. She's brilliant, smart. This is what she has to say. Studies have shown kids are hanging out less, are waiting longer to drive, are more often clinically depressed, they're stressed, and less likely to cope as adults due to smartphones and social media. She even quotes this. She says, the rates of teen depression and suicide have skyrocketed since 2011. It's not an exaggeration to describe this generation as being on the brink of the worst mental health crisis in decades. Most of the deterioration can be traced to their phones. And as working with teenagers, we're beginning to see this. More kids are seeing psychologists. More kids are stressed out. It's a common phenomenon that we're going to continue to see the damage, I think, as generation after generation this continues to happen. In fact, sixth graders are going to be the first generation to grow up their whole lives with an iPhone. The first generation that's ever always had an iPhone available. It'll be interesting to see what happens. So that's our broken culture. We also have a lot of broken kids in how they think. There's a lot of craziness in the thoughts and so forth, but this one kind of blows me away. Barna released these statistics on how teenagers view or rate sin, all right? The first 1 through 4, they got pretty right. Adultery, murder, these things are really bad, and then here's where it kind of goes astray. The fifth worst sin a teenager thinks is not recycling. 6 is thinking negatively about someone with a different point of view. 7 was overeating. 8, consuming too much water or electricity. 9 was wanting something that doesn't belongs to somebody else, and the last one was viewing porn. So put that bluntly, teenagers view recycling and overwatering your yard worse than looking at porn. It's pretty crazy, right? That's the viewpoint. That's what our teenagers think. Maybe not all the teenagers here in our church or in our community, but that's what the mass thinks. This is the culture, this is the world our kids are growing up in. And this is the mindset of our teenagers. I tell you that not to dishearten you or upset you or get you angry, but to say this. This is our opportunity. For such a time as this is the church's opportunity and chance to share and show Jesus to a broken and hurting world. This is our chance, our opportunity. And see, the youth ministry needs the church to do this. Listen, live up to its calling. That we, the church, would live up to the calling to be Jesus. That we would smell like Jesus, we would talk like Jesus, that our lives would demonstrate Jesus. That's how we, the youth ministry, needs you, the church, to do. See, I love Paul gets this idea. And he tells Timothy in our scripture passage this. He says, you, however, know all my teaching. You know my way of life, my purpose, my faith, my patience, my love, my endurance, persecutions and sufferings, what kind of things happened to me. He's simply saying, you've seen me in the good times and the bad times, and my faith is backed up by my life. Goes on to 14, he says, but as for you, continue in what you've learned and have become convinced of, because you know those from whom you learned it. Paul is telling Timothy, like, you've seen my life. And what I have to say is validated by how I lived my life. That my faith and my preaching and my teaching and my life all are equal. That I've backed it up. And I think it's a challenge for us. It's a challenge for you. It's a challenge for you, mom and dad. Are you living up to our calling? My wife and I are expecting our second, and we're really excited. She's 13 weeks pregnant. And moms, maybe you can testify to this, that she gets this special superpower now that she's 13 weeks pregnant. It's an amazing sniffer. Superpowered, too. I mean, we could be a quarter of a mile down the street and she could smell our garbage. Or she'd be upstairs in the shower and I'm cooking and she'll know what's for dinner. I mean, she has a sniffer. And it is amazing. She can smell some stuff, right? And I say that to say that teenagers have that same power. Their ability to sniff out what is true or fake or false in our lives is overwhelming. And if you've ever raised kids, they can call you out on your stuff. And I'm here to tell you our teens can smell when we've gone astray. They're smelling. And they're looking and they're watching. Your kids are watching. I want to teach you this principle I think is pretty cool, and I've learned this in college. It's this: more is caught than what is taught. That our youth culture, more is caught than what is taught. Teenagers, more is caught than what is taught. And here's what I mean, is that more is learned about church on the drive here than maybe that what takes place in the service this morning. That more can be learned about God during the week and on the weekend than on a Sunday. That more can be learned about love and how we treat our wives and how we treat our husbands than maybe that love chapter itself. That listen, that more is caught than what is taught. But listen, if we don't live up to our proclamation, maybe the message can't ever be heard. Not that we shouldn't ever stop proclaiming, and God could use a mess, and he always does. But I hope we get what I'm trying to say here. That maybe our kids are deaf to spiritual things because they haven't been able to really hear what we have to say. Think of it this way. Imagine a teenager walks through those double doors right there. And he comes walking into the service, right in the middle of service, and he's wearing some headphones, the oversized ones that are like massively enormous, you know what I'm talking about? And so he comes walking in the middle of the service, and imagine what everybody would be thinking. I know what I would be thinking, like, who is this kid, right? What does he think he's doing walking in the middle of a church service wearing these headphones, not paying any attention to what we have to say? You can imagine those thoughts, right? Maybe we'd be angry, upset, or whatnot. Understandably. But what if that's happening all the time? That teenagers aren't able to hear what we have to say because they've seen and witnessed something other. That they're deaf to the gospel because of our lives. I hope that's not the case. And I want to tell you this, mom and dad, despite what culture says, parents are still the greatest influence in teenagers' lives. You still are. Statistics continue to show it is the greatest influence. Even whether your kids want to admit that or whether they want you in their lives or not, you still have the greatest influence in a teenager's life. So we must seize this opportunity. So church, may we live up to the calling. And secondly, I'm here this morning to ask for an investment. Some of you are thinking, just like a teenager, just like the youth pastor, asking for some more money, right? No, I'm not talking about money because we know money doesn't fix things, right? You throw money at relationships, it doesn't help. It doesn't fix the heart. More money, more problems. Notorious B.I.G. Oh, besides the point. But what I'm trying to say is we need an investment of your time. An investment of your time. That is the greatest resource, like Doug made mention earlier. It's the greatest resource we have because we can't get more. And I'm telling you, our teenagers, our young people need your time. I know we're so busy and there's so many things to be done. But can we say no to some things, some good things, so that we can say yes to something great? That investing in your teen years are the most important years. And sometimes we feel as youth pastors that parents step back in the middle school and high school years. I'm saying the opposite. Step in. That this is the time. This is the prime time. This is where your kids need you the most. It's an opportune time. And we as the church should take advantage of it. I'm not the only one saying this. Kristen Ivy, a long-term expert in child development, she spoke at this conference I was at. And here's what she said. There are 3 critical phases in a person's life when it comes to faith development. The first one I was pretty shocked by because I never heard that before. The first phase was ages 2 to 4. She said the first touch ministries are so crucial and critical that we're finding that ages 2 to 4, how they have an experience at church will shape the rest of their lives, how they view God and how they view the church. She then goes on to say second, which I believe, middle school ministry. That's why I'm in it, right? And high school is third. That this is the right time to make the investment. And we can also back that up by saying simply, I'm asking you, when did you come to know Christ? I know for me it was in middle school and in high school. And I bet you many of us here would raise our hands and say, that was when I heard about Christ. That's when I made a decision for him and decided to follow him. It was in middle school and high school times. I'm telling you, the time is now. It's the right time to invest. Right time to invest. I want to close by sharing this. My daughter, she's 2 years old, and she continues to teach me so much. So much. And it's actually amazing. She's like a sponge that, like, anytime I say something, she's more than likely going to say the same thing, right? And sometimes that's good, and sometimes it's bad. Of course, in my household, it's always me the bad, right? Of course. But what was cool is this past weekend, we brought her in here to the 11 o'clock service, and we had her with her in worship. And it was funny. We let her just stand there in the worship service, and she started clapping, she started singing, she started raising her hands even. She was even jumping around. Thank you, Brad, for showing her that. But that's how she responded in the worship service. And so I was thinking about this week, like, did we really sit down with her and say, Hannah, when we go to church service, you need to sing, you need to raise your hand, you need you to worship? No, we never had that conversation with her. Well, how'd you get it? Because she caught it. I didn't have to teach her, she caught it. And I want to say our kids, our teenagers, they're always watching. They're always watching how we behave church online or offline. They're always watching when we're doing in secret or not so secret. They're always watching all the time. And they're catching a whole lot more than we want to admit, maybe. And hopefully they're catching the good things. And that's why I'm calling us to rise up to be more like Jesus, because they're always watching and they're sniffing too. Sniffing and watching. Here's our opportunity. Here's our chance. Here's your chance to invest in the right time for the right opportunity in the next generation. It's going to be worth it.